So we wanted to talk about our business observations pipeline, didn't we?
Yep.
Which we put in place when we did the ISO 27001 certification process, where we had to look at opportunities and risks to the business. So we had identified that those are actually the same to us. You know, you can see any risk as an opportunity and any opportunity as a risk. And so rather than doing two separate pipelines with different criteria, we decided to sort of combine them into one, which, depending on how you look at it, we can get benefits out of as a business, or is a risk to the business. So we sort of combined that, and we got really positive feedback on that from the auditor. And we've now been putting that in practice for, I guess, a few months.
Yeah, since late November. And I think to put a little bit of context on that, I think it's fair to say before we joined the business, the company was reasonably reactional, so that something would come up. We have to deal with that now. And I don't think that was that consistent overall.
Yeah.
We joined the business, we had a lot of ideas about what we needed to tackle and prioritize, which I think we did reasonably successfully, but it did mean that we had a load of what you could now call observations in a range of backlogs.
Yep.
And they didn't really have, I don't think they really had enough visibility, and there wasn't a system in order to process them and therefore chip away at these things over time, which is now what I think we've got. We've got our prototype, if you like, that is able to deal with the things that you're describing there.
Yes, but just to nuance that, because I think, I had a discussion with Gerard about this, where it's also not the point to create this endless backlog of stuff we never get to work on, because we also, like everyone else, I think, have a tendency to do that, which is creating this list of cool ideas that just depress you because you don't make enough progress on them. And the business observations pipeline also has the possibility of saying, well, sure, good observation, but we're not going to do anything with that now.
Yeah.
And
that's built into the process.
I wouldn't see it as a backlog as such, because it should be an empty inbox, if that makes sense. You don't have 100 unread emails. We process them as and when they come in. And then they move into either of these three stages: the pursue now, keep open, or in storage, which are, okay, yes, these are urgent enough for us to immediately do something with. We want to stay on top of these, but they're not urgent, and these aren't important to us, but we still archive them and keep track of them.
Do you want to, because we did that this morning. We used one as an example, if you like, that was already in there, and we moved that through the stages, where, for people that don't know, we use ClickUp.
Yep.
And we're started to use more and more what we call pipelines, which is a Kanban board style representation of the data, where we can actually visually move it from one column to the other, depending on what part of our process it's in, which the fact that we're using more and more pipelines must mean, I think, that we like using those, and it kind of works for us as a business. Do you want to use an example, Thibaut, and give an overall of how we might tackle something?
Sure. So one of the ones we talked about today was, because we're operating remotely as a business, if an individual, an employee, gets his internet or her internet disrupted for an extended period of time, that is something that can happen and would have an impact on the business. And so that observation was raised because somebody actually did have an interruption of their internet connectivity. We resolved it in the moment, but we realized that as a business, we didn't have a strategy to deal with that across the business. So it was reliant on being able to improvise and a sort of support structure in place, if you will. And so what happened is we put it in the stage that we call brain farted. So that is, okay, well, we've got an idea. I don't have time to flesh it out now. I'm just going to put it in the pipeline. I put it in there, and then I came back to it at a later stage and then defined the observation in itself. So added some details so that it was ready for review. As soon as we move it into that defined stage, then it gets reviewed in one of the next strategic leadership meetings. So we work through that pipeline as much as we can every week if we've got no other urgent agenda items to deal with. And so we chip away, like you said, at that pipeline, and we assign an impact score. So how much we think it will impact the business if it happens, how likely is it to happen, and how much effort will it take us to mitigate it. And depending on whether it's a high impact, high likelihood, and a low effort, ideally, those are the ones we want to deal with first, and then sort of going down from there.
Those scores help us to prioritize that.
Exactly. And in this case, we said off the top of my head that it was a 3 impact. So it's a scale from 1 to 4. We don't like 5-point or 7-point scales because they allow you to go in the middle and you need to make a decision. Is it high or low? So we said it was a 3 impact. I think a 1 or a 2 likelihood. I think a 1 likelihood because we've all got this sort of support mechanism in place. You know, all of us can set up a hotspot, that kind of stuff. So having a complete internet failure, let's say, is quite unlikely. But if it were to happen on an important project with an important person in the business, then that would obviously be a problem, a big problem. And then the effort, we said, would be a 2. Because putting something in place that would make us more resilient would require us as a business to invest some resources into that. So we were talking about potentially giving people an upgrade to their internet subscription, or providing people with a backup router or whatever, those kind of things.
Yeah.
We haven't fleshed out the solution because that's not the point of that, but we did identify that this was something that was important enough for our business to pursue. So we moved it into the pursue now phase, where we assign it to an owner. So in this case, our sysadmin will look at that because it's within his remit. And then he will come up with a plan together with us, but it's his responsibility to come up with a plan. In which case it will then move into action plans, and that means that it's been put in the roadmap, the resources have been allocated, and then it will go into either implemented when it's done, or if we have implemented it but we still want to keep an eye on it, then it will stay in keep open, and that's sort of the process there, which we've gone through actually together this morning, haven't we, or this afternoon?
Yeah. So what key benefits do you feel this approach would have for us, Thibaut? Because obviously we created it around November time, so a few months ago, and we're starting to get to grips with it and embed it within other kind of processes that we've got.
So for me, it comes back to the low voltage light story. So I don't remember which business guru type guy uses this story. He talks about sitting in a plane. So he was doing flying lessons, 1-man plane. Yeah. And there was a low voltage light on his dashboard. He hadn't read up on what that light meant. And it was just a small blinking light. It wasn't one of the big engine failure ones. So he's like, I'll be fine. Half an hour into his flight, he had to do a crash landing because that just meant that he didn't get enough electricity to his control systems. And so his plane was failing, right? And so he translated that principle into his business, saying that you need to pay attention even to the smallest indicator. And even if you don't know what it means, And so for me, putting this system in place means that people will raise observations early and often. And even if we don't do anything with them, which doesn't matter, it gives everyone in the organization the possibility of raising a concern or an observation. And it means that we will take it seriously. We will take it as seriously as if, someone on the leadership team were to raise a concern. So I think that's the main benefit, is we're less likely to miss out on important observations, both negative and positive, opportunities and risks.
Which makes it quite similar in its process, if you like, to the holacracy tension that we do as well. So it's a very compatible process, which again is encouraging people to give feedback and raise things, because we all know that we're imperfect and we have a dynamic environment. So we need to have that visibility and awareness to those things, so that we have a chance of making a decision on whether we do something or not.
I think one of the, or sort of, if we're starting to identify some of the common themes here, maybe with all of these processes and pipelines that we put in place, is I think all of them are there to make sure that everybody gets a voice.
Yeah.
So to make it easy for information to go up and down and sidewards in the organization, so everybody gets the opportunity to voice their opinion about pretty much anything. All of these processes are intrinsically agile. That means we understand that our first version of it will probably not be perfect. So we build in the capacity to transform into the process. So the capacity to transform the process in itself is built into the process. And then the third one, I think, is, so let's say there are four. I think the third one is this pipeline aspect. So we've got this structured process, high-level structured process. So that, yes, we've got a procedure document, but it's a high-level, simple process to say, okay, we're moving through these phases, and these phases mean these things, to make sure that we don't forget about doing these things. So we've got the same for recruitment, got the same for customer relationship, we've got the same for deals and sales, and we're starting to do the same actually for releases as well. So product releases. So we've got this cyclic, almost cyclic approach in many occasions, where we say phase, and then now I forgot the fourth one. I just had it. I think I've mixed what I wanted to say for the third and the fourth one. So there's this high level process, and then there's this visual aspect. So the visual aspect for me is the high level process. Is this regular heartbeat. So a lot of the processes that we put in place have some kind of recurring cadence in them. We integrate them into the processes. So if we include them in one of our weekly meetings, or we include them in one of our monthly meetings, we make sure that we revisit them often, so that even if it's not urgent, we still practice that process.
And we embed it as a way of being.
Exactly. Which, I don't want to talk about the diversity and inclusion stuff now, but for me, that's also something similar, where actually it's also one of our pipelines, if you will. It's a different nature, but it's also a process that we go through in big steps.
I think that also fits into the mentoring as well, rather than just having this yearly meeting or performance. You have monthly mentoring, you have quarterly grow process. You're giving that feedback regularly, rather than having to just pick up on it in a reactionary sense, potentially.
Exactly. So I think those are, and we're almost now doing that subconsciously, I think, because we've put a number of those processes in place. But I think it's interesting to sort of formulate those as principles for processes that we put in place. Because we're applying them, and most of the things that we've put in place are working quite well, actually.
And then actually what's happening is, when another problem, if you like, or challenge comes up in the business, we're using these tools quite quickly and we're modifying or tweaking them to solve another challenge, and everyone's used to that tool, and that tool seems to be effective and it's agile. So it's quite a quick way of solving kind of new challenges, if you like, or things that occur in the business.
Exactly. And I think, because as you were speaking, I was thinking, okay, are we then not at risk of creating new processes too often? But actually, if I look back at the ISO 27001 process, I was really adamant on not creating new processes if we didn't need to.
Yeah.
So we've got the roadmap review. Let's use that. We've got the SRIPs in the Agile.
Try mentoring.
We've got the leadership meeting, the try meeting. Yeah. So we're reusing these processes if we can. We don't overcomplicate it just for the sake of overcomplicating it.
And I think one of the other advantages with the use of ClickUp, for example, when we're moving things from one of these columns to the other, is that you've set it up to have these automatic checklists that are generating. I'm trying to imagine what it'd be like to go through this process if I had to go to documents and then fill out things on read documents, to see it visually, to move it for new checklists to come up, which I then know I have to tick off before going to the next stage. For me, that feels like a much easier process.
Yes. And we do have the process documents for people that want to learn in that way or feel more safe with that. But I try to limit it to a maximum how many pages I write of stuff that no one will ever read, you know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mark.
Awesome.